Hello, welcome back on this Monday. All right, first off, I have to fix something that I said yesterday. I said that The Wind in the Willows animated film was narrated by Natasha Richardson, but it's not. Vanessa Redgrave. I don't know why I said Natasha Richardson. Okay. Now, yesterday I had so much fun reading yesterday. Oh my gosh. I'm having a ball. Now, we know that Fergie turns into what I would qualify as a terrible person. And maybe she already is at this point in the book. We don't know. We don't know at what point she kind of turned into the person that we know now, or, the things in her life that drove her to it. We're kind of seeing her side, but obviously I'm sure she's going to paint herself with a softer brush, as we all do. But it's interesting, and she is relatable. And there are so many things that I've read already that I think, yeah, I get it. I totally get it. And I was talking to my mom this morning, and I told her that we were reading this book. And I said, I remember you liking her, and I see why when I'm reading this. And she said, oh yeah, like she was so relatable. She was just so normal, and she felt so accessible. But she did say, she's like, I could never stand Prince Andrew though. So even back in the 90s, my mom just thought he was a piece of work. So, okay. This next chapter, I'm just trying to keep my eye on the time. I might have to split this up and do 2 videos today because I am running behind. I did not do my recap of All the Way to the River yesterday because I just didn't have it in me. Eventually, we'll get there. All right. This chapter 3 is entitled Fine Art and Kedgeree. I entered the working world with a well-used mini clubman estate, a boxy little car handed down from my step-grandfather, and an allowance of $150 a month from Dad's. I would mostly survive on what I earned and was proud of that, though it wouldn't be easy. I took a temp job at a flat-sharing agency before hiring on as a secretary to Neil Durden Smith, a friend of Dad's, at his public relations firm in Knightsbridge. My starting salary, $6,000 a year. I am always curious, like it's the dollar sign, it's not the pound sign, but I am always wondering if it was actually $6,000, is it 6,000 pounds? It's been converted to US dollars, I guess. I'd be more interested to know the pounds, but anyway. I hurled myself into the whirl of London, into the wine bars and restaurants and music clubs, and into the dating game that threw me for a loop. I look around today and see how 18-year-olds manage their affairs of the heart, and they seem so grown up by comparison. I was so naive, so uncertain. I had no idea what I was doing or how I should be doing it. Shall I ring him today or ring him tomorrow? Will he ever ring me again? Should we go to the Italian place or the French bistro? To the reggae bar or the disco? What was right? I'd get polixed. I've never seen that word in my whole life. Oh my gosh. I'm going to have to get out my dictionary. By indecision, unable to do anything without 3 outside opinions, begging for reassurance, trusting none of it. Who would give me the time and care to show me the way? Mom wasn't there and Dad's was too busy. By then he had remarried to a wise and gentle woman, and I rang my stepmother Susan about 5 times a day, until Dad's would get exasperated and tell me I was being a bore. Aw. I would be always fretting so much that I had upset people, that if I didn't go to dinner, I would always be fretting so much that I had upset people, that if I didn't go to dinner, I'd be unpopular, and then I would have no friends. My whole life had been a beauty contest, and though I knew I had no shot at winning, I could still be Miss Congeniality. But only if I never tripped up, only if I never frowned once. As a result, I was immensely popular. Can you imagine how many friends I had? Of course I was popular. I was all things to all men, except when it came to bedding down, where I was the most conservative, having swallowed Dad's warnings about a nice girl's reputation. I catered totally to their demands, their interests, which wasn't so hard, since I would have been hard-pressed to name my own. I ran an approval-seeking marathon. I wanted everybody to love me, I suppose. I was crying out for love. Of course it blew up in my face. I was trying too hard. I understood no limits, no boundary between me and the you. I would inundate people with my neediness, suffocate them really. No reasonable man could stand it, and so he would run away, or go chase after someone with more self-respect. I set myself up for rejection and got permanently hurt and stunted. At cocktail parties, I was great fun, completely wild, playing the fool, wanting to make people laugh. But I hated those convivial evenings. People would be saying, "Great party," and I would think, what is a great party? I didn't know what fun was, didn't grasp the concept. It was like Sanskrit to me. Finally, I had a real boyfriend, a man a few years older who worked in the city, London's financial district. He brought me into a new social set, and I loved him very much. But he was also full of teasing, which I would feign to chuckle off, though I'd be injured to the quick. It was always good fun to tease old Fergie. She would laugh and bounce back. It was the only way to deal with her, to fend off her smothering and to keep her at a safe distance. I worked hard and played hard 5 days a week, and then I'd load the mini clubman with dirty laundry and drive home to Dummer for the weekend, away from London's smoke and stress, to switch off and smell clean air and find some peace. I think a lot of women can relate to that. That's something that I have to work on myself, and I think I've mentioned it before, is providing space in a relationship. And I think like me and my man, like we have totally different ways of communicating. And like I'm an open book when it comes to my relationship, and I'll just be yapping, Surprise, I'm sure you're shocked. But he is very reserved. Like he is much more reserved than I am, and much more prone to going inward when he's working through something, as opposed to me, which is like, let's talk about let's yap about it constantly. And so that's always like an interesting, sort of back and forth to sort of navigate that. So, but in a lot of relationships, I can see how, like when you're just desperate to be loved and to finally be loved, and then you finally feel like you found someone, and then it's just you pour yourself into them, which ironically makes them withdraw. And you're constantly playing this game of, okay, like how where's the boundary? Like how far is too far? How close can I get? When do I need to recede? It's like this stressful dance that just completely ties your nervous system up in knots. And it can be so hard to know yourself when you are looking for approval, because you are looking for anything outside of yourself. So I totally understand what she's describing here. All right, let's keep going. In 1980, I dropped everything and set off with my good friend Charlotte Eden on another New World journey. We stopped first to see Mom and Hector and plant trees in El Pucara, their new ranch, and then set off on a 2-week bus trip to Sao Paulo, the site of the largest volume of falling water in the world, where Charlotte and I spent the night on a bench, and finally Rio de Janeiro. In that great sprawling city, I got my first brush with real poverty. The sight of so many homeless children unsettled me. One day, I thought, in the formless way of the young, I would do something about it. From Brazil, we flew to San Francisco. We had next to no funds, and dads didn't believe in credit cards for young women. After a few hours of sleep in a bus station, we reached Squaw Valley in the high Sierras, flat broke. To raise money to keep going, Charlotte and I put our energies to work. From 6 a.m. to 10 a.m., we cleaned the urinals and lavatories at our youth hostel. From 10 a.m. to 4 p.m., we served as human chairlifts, carrying disabled children up the mountain and skiing down with them, then up again. And from 4 to 10 p.m., we toiled in the local strudel house, making apple strudel and hot chocolate and swabbing down the machines. The lifestyle had its drawbacks. I got hugely fat from eating strudels, but after 6 weeks, we'd raised $600 apiece. But how in the world could you get so fat from eating strudels when you're hiking up the mountain all day long? From 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. You'd think that you'd burn all that off. Anyway, much later, when I would travel in comfort and be grateful for it, nothing rankled me more than when the tabloids made me out as some inveterate food fighter, a thrower of buns. That was not me. I would not do that sort of thing, for I knew firsthand what hard work it was to clean up after people. Our earnings took Charlotte and me by bus to the Grand Canyon, to New Orleans, and finally to Palm Beach, Florida, where Hector and Mom had polo friends. Wanderings done, we went to play tennis at one men's double game. At one of those exclusive clubs, and I remember Charlotte and me watching a men's double game on the next court and cackling at how absurdly funny everything seemed in Palm Beach after months of Greyhound bus stations. Then I stepped on a tennis ball and broke my ankle. The men I'd been laughing at had to ferry me off the court, which was something to consider. I had passed through all those bus shelters at 4 a.m, and no harm had ever come to me. I'd spent hours next to the rootless and indigent... So sorry. And they were honest within themselves and looked down on nobody. It wasn't pretty in those shelters, and I was eager to escape them, but every day was real there. The world made sense to me. Then I got to Palm Beach, where I was perfectly protected, bathed in luxury, back under the wing of our suitable contacts, and everything seemed unreal, out of whack, and I felt so disconnected that I landed in a cast. If I had been inclined to read below the surface of things, I might have wondered just where I belong. After 6 months abroad, I returned to London to make my way. Everyone assumed I would have my own flat, like other girls from my background with rich enough families. But our family's house in Chelsea had since been sold, and I rented a room for $50 a week from Carolyn Beckwith Smith. The two of us shared a small 2-bedroom south of the Thames. Once a solid working-class district, Clapham had been invaded by the white-collar types who were priced out of Chelsea or Belgravia. It was dotted with fabric shops and sidewalk cafes, but the neighborhood remained on the wrong side of the river, and muggings were common. We lived on Lavender Hill, near a graveyard, and it unnerved me whenever I parked next to it. Number 40 Lavender Gardens was a nondescript brick townhouse like thousands of others in southwest London. I had a single bed and a chest of drawers and a bathroom around the corner, and that was it. But I also had Carolyn, my best friend, my guardian angel. She had the patience of Job, and every day she'd listen to my problems, which were as legion and twisted as ever. I might have seen a fair swath of the world, but I was still far from worldly. I needed to find work, but detested going through an agency. They would test you first for typing in shorthand where my skills could not pass muster. It was frustrating because I knew I could bluff my way into a job and manage, if only I could get around the test. Then I saw a listing for a personal assistant at an art gallery in Covent Garden. 28 and over apply. I rang up and said, I am not 28, I am 21 and you need me. I know I'm perfect for this job and I am coming down for an interview. Such amazing boldness. I seemed so confident and strong that they hired me on the spot. It was a lesson I'd keep resisting, but when I went after what I wanted, I could indeed make myself happy. My new boss was a lanky perfectionist named Bill Drummond, and his high standards made the gallery a wonderful place with its rich wooden floors and serene music for background. Like Hector, he really talked to me. He'd launch into long and passionate discussions about art and its relationship to the environment in which the artist worked. Bill was wonderfully witty as well, alive to the gossip that resides in a painting. He opened my eyes to look at pictures in a different way, to take in the wealth of color and form in the world. I must have done a good job, as I stayed on for 4 years. I should have had a great time, but I couldn't really enjoy myself, couldn't quite relax. Deep in the sanctum of myself, I knew I was letting someone down. Most of my friends were account executives or some such, so I had to be falling short in Dad's eyes. Now I think he was quite proud of me, though he never would show it. And though I worked so hard to please my boss, I chronically worried that I had bungled some invoice or muffed a press release. It was ridiculous, really, but I couldn't help myself. I didn't realize that everybody cheats, that when people write a press release, they probably get 5 other people to help them and still take the credit without a second thought. Later on, when I became an instant celebrity and the press rushed to compile my thumbnail biography, my boss from another job I'd held briefly would wax on how competent I had been, how I wasn't afraid of anybody, and was remarkably upfront. In truth, I had feared everyone and their shadows. I lived in chronic fear, but I knew I must take a deep breath and get on with it. I might hyperventilate, but I would cope. I worked like a fiend for that gallery, running late all the time, gulping black coffee like spring water. The mini clubman had expired of natural causes, and I had bought myself a similarly decrepit Volkswagen, where I... And finally, a more reliable used BMW. I ate on the run. Carolyn and I were always dieting, at least when we weren't binging. Once she'd been on fruit for 6 weeks and was finally allowed a bit of chicken. When I came home that evening to open the fridge, there it was, a tasty little drumstick on a dish. Not realizing this was Carolyn's big night, I devoured it. Carolyn absolutely freaked out when she found it was gone. We nearly fell out right there over that chicken leg. I'm so sorry. First of all, it's the image of a single drumstick on a plate. Just one sad, lonely drumstick. And I'm just imagining the state of your mind after 6 weeks of eating only fruit. How crazy you would be. And then you're so excited. You've got your little drumstick on the plate and you just can't wait. You're probably watching the clock all day. Can't wait for 6 o'clock. I'm going to get to have a drumstick. And then you come home and you realize that your flatmate has devoured it. Oh, my Lord. Hilarious. I had horrific migraines, aggravated no doubt by the stress of juggling my meager finances. Though I took a second job on Saturdays as a salesperson in a maternity shop, my ends barely met. I piled up parking tickets by the handful. I was rushing around, no time to check the meters, and there was no way I could pay them off and cover my share of the phone bill. Some mornings there would be a knock on the door from the parking Gestapo. "Is Miss Ferguson in, please? We have a summons for her." And I'd say, "No, I'm sorry, sir. She's gone to work." And ease the door shut on them. What money I had went towards tanning salons. Girl. Restaurants and jazz bars. I loved to be bathed in sound and rhythm, though I was an inhibited dancer, thinking that everyone was watching me and they must think I looked stupid. There was very little cash left for my wardrobe, which was definitely bohemian, sort of an upscale Salvation Army. I had my trusty beige boots, Allie's rejects, and a well-cut man's dinner jacket from an antique shop, which I'd wear every day. I refurbished a couple of secondhand shirts. I'd rescued them from a friend's dustbin on their way to the trash, sewed up the cigarette marks, and they were fine. I never had any outfits. I just pulled things together. I could brush up quite nicely if I wanted to, however, with clothes lent by my angelic stepmother, and some brushing up was called for whenever I got hooked into that notorious Sloane Ranger Preserve, the shooting weekend in the country. The Sloanes were quite an astounding species. They will give our future anthropologists a run for their money. What makes them special and distinct is that they think they are frightfully upper class when actually they are not, and so they must try harder than those at the very top. The court at Buckingham Palace is full of them, but more on that later. They all went to the same boarding schools where little Muffy and Daphne played frightfully well together and became lifelong chums or muckers. Their dress code was rigid, if eccentric. Laura Ashley shirts with a frill up top and pearls over the frill, a cardi over the shoulders, tweedy skirts trailing down near the calf, navy blue tights, practical shoes without heels, slightly scruffy in other words, but expensive. Sloanes have the most riotous nicknames, and especially the males of the species, with their spiffing sense of humor. A man with a red face would be Pinky, also applied to anyone whose surname was Salmon. Dad's would be called Perky because he was always pale. A man named Roger Marsh was invariably swampy. A Freddie Gosling would answer to Quack Quack. Doesn't this sound insufferable? The shooting weekend would start on Friday with, "Are you getting a lift down with Henry?" And you would get a lift down to the country house that afternoon where you'd been invited to stay because Camilla's mummy and daddy were giving a little dance on Saturday night. Here you'd be offered a G&T on arrival. Would you like to take your drink up to your bath with you? And after that, you would change for dinner, but it was frightfully relaxed on Friday night, just trousers or a skirt and a shirt. Then it was, would you like breakfast in your room, or would you be down with the boys? After Saturday breakfast would come the challenge that separated the more precious Lady Sloanes from the unvarnished manhunters. Will you be going out with the guns? If you'd resolved to bite the bullet, as it were, you would pull on your corduroys and your green Wellington boots, and you would stand in the pouring rain for hours. That was the thing to be done. Then back to the house for a glass of sherry before lunch to ward off the gripe. And then, if you were really after the man, you'd follow the guns out again to watch the sky rain dead pheasants. Back to the house for tea, then perhaps a bit of telly. It would be rather jolly to watch Blind Date or something like that. Then you'd go upstairs for a bath and another G&T, and you would put on your long dress for Camilla's dance. For Sunday breakfast, at which you'd be dreadfully but comically hungover, you would be treated to a lovely plate of kedgeree, an ensemble of rice and eggs and cream and fish all mixed together. It would be awfully good, thanks to the leftover salmon from dinner. Then it would be off for a morning constitutional and some fresh air before you drank your Bloody Mary over the Sunday papers. You'd pretend to be frightfully intelligent and digest the Sunday Times when you hadn't the foggiest idea of what you were reading. If no one was watching, you might steal a glance at News of the World, Mummy and Daddy's grown-up equivalent of the comics. Would you like another bloody before lunch? You would have a huge lunch, eat far too much, before you all piled in to drive back to London with Henry in his car. And on Monday, you'd recount the lurid events to all your office chums with a long-suffering but good-natured air. It was frightful. I can't tell you what a bore. It rained the entire day, and then my dog Tittle picked up the wrong birds. I confess to having spent weekends just like that one and coming back for more. And it was easy for those awful thumbnails to whittle and wedge me into the Sloane's box. Right breeding, right schooling, proper horsey background, tally-ho with Fergie and her jolly japes, and all that. But the truth was just the opposite, much to Dad's chagrin. Though my father was a nonconformist himself, he would have swooned in relief that I had only come out at the debutante's ball. My attitude was all wrong. I didn't grasp the rules, and even when they were put to me, they simply made no sense. After one country weekend, I sent a thank-you gift to the lady of the house, a mixed flower arrangement that might have wreathed a racehorse. And the woman later told me, you really don't need to send a huge bunch of flowers. Just a letter or a little posy is fine. She must have thought me terribly pretentious for a young person who was living on $1,000 a month at most. But I wasn't meaning to be grand. I wanted her to like me, and I just didn't understand. Unconscious, once again. The fact I never got along with the real British establishment. The fact was, I never got along with the real British establishment. I had no patience for those arrogant twits who sat there with their fat tummies and pale faces and made huge, whopping, great statements on foreigners and morality. I never sought to gain entry into the right set. I had lots of different friends from different sets. I've always wanted a smorgasbord in life, not just a plate of kedgeree. I had Argentinian friends through Hector and French friends through Florence Belmondo and artist friends through Bill Drummond. And I had friends as well from the fast lanes of the Swiss Alps and of international motor car racing. I first skied in Switzerland at the age of 4, when I'd stand between my mother's legs and whoop for more speed as my own limbs bowed like India rubber. The next year, I decided I could do it on my own and took off with my big sister. Jane skied like she rode, like a ballerina, but I would get down the mountain first. No cautious snowplow for me, just full bore ahead from point A to point B. I was chuffed I could do it, proud to be following Mum, thrilled to be going so fast. As I grew older and more contained, stuck in my stale room at Hurst Lodge, then clogged by the fumes of Clapham, I longed for the tonic of Verbier. Is that the place in Switzerland? Guys, I'm such a pleb. It's pathetic. I would go into debt to fly there, but it was worth it. I felt loose and free, as though I shed my coat. When I skimmed down the mountain's most perilous black runs, with the cold air alive on my cheeks and nose, I blew away the cobwebs of central heating and pollution. I felt clean again, from the inside out. It was in Verbier in 1982 that I found Paddy McNally. Some 20 years older than I, he had an immense chalet, referred to locally as the Castle, overlooking the town. He hosted a continual round of parties and business dinners, all with superb wine. Paddy was probably Dad's worst nightmare. Not the right age, not in the household of cavalry, just a man named McNally in motor racing. Here she goes again. But I loved Paddy for all the things he wasn't, for the phony graces he rejected, the airs he'd refused to put on, even after he'd done quite well for himself. He had a sharp, practical mind, a large and open heart. He was just himself, straight down the line. Paddy showed me a different way. He never strived for effect, and he took each day head on without flinching. He taught me to open my bank statements, even when I knew I had an overdraft. Much of my time was spent with Paddy's two sons, Sean and Rollo, who were 11 and 9 when we met up. Soon we were acting like family. I was their nanny and their friend. I took them to the slopes or the video store and helped put them to bed at night, and it felt good to be needed, to belong to people. Those children meant the world to me, and they taught me quite a lot, not least my need to toughen up. Boys of that age are always calling you strange names, fat or thin, ugly or smelly. Well, I would say boys that aren't raised right. And you gain ground when you stop taking it personally. Through Paddy, I also met Richard Burton, another urbane, ex-racing driver. I was thinking like Richard Burton, like the actor. I was like, no way. Another urbane ex-racing driver who now published fine art books. In 1984, I left the gallery in Covent Garden to become Richard's acquisitions editor in London, a dream opportunity. I was virtually, though my salary was never much, topping off at $18,000 a year, I was virtually my own boss. I could set my own hours and spend a lot of my time close to Richard's home base in Geneva. Here, surely, were the basics for fulfillment: a creative job with frequent travel, a mature man who cared about me, a widening circle of exciting friends. And yet, I lived each day with anxiety. I always thought Paddy was going to dump me, and that to keep him, I must be the perfect girlfriend. When he saw someone else or failed to call me, I would never bring myself to ask him, "Why did you do that?" When he saw someone else, I was terrified he might turn around and say, "Well, okay, stuff you and I'm off." I worked so hard at being Paddy's ideal partner. I desperately wanted to marry him, though I never dared to broach the subject, even as he kept saying, "I must do the decent thing." Deep down, I knew he didn't really want to get married. We were at such different times in our lives, but I was afraid to let the relationship go, to be on my own, in my void, and so I just carried on. Yet I still sought more, still hoped that someone out there could give me what I needed, not seeing that the incompletion lay most within myself. Okay, this is chapter 4, entitled Just Keep Smiling. Let's go. Given Dad's polo connections, my orbit continued to intersect the royal families every now and again. It was a normal part of my life until I reached the age of self-consciousness and promptly got intimidated. I will never forget the first time I met the Prince of Wales at a Guards Polo Club's drinks party. I was 18 years old, and by the time Dad's introduced us, I was so fevered with anticipation that my tongue felt too big for my mouth. I'd had it all planned out. I would talk to Charles about the mountains, something a prince would find interesting. But now that he was here in the flesh, I blurted out something about rabbits. Totally and utterly opposite. I could have gratefully died at that moment. I wanted to vanish into the wall. With Diana, whom I had known from adolescence, it was different. I ran into her a year before her wedding, during one of Charles's polo matches, when Diana was 19 years old and still teaching kindergarten. Our mothers had been in school together, where Mum and Frances held some legendary burping competitions. Diana and I hit it off, and soon we were lunching together once a week. Diana invited me to her wedding, a very big deal, and thoughtfully gave me some material to make up into a dress. Needless to say, I had nothing suitable in Clapham. I went to the ceremony on my own in a very big car. I walked up to St. Paul's and in on my own, to Dome A, Row A, Seat 4, and walked out the same way, nerves ringing at every step. Diana's flatmates were all included for wedding breakfast at the palace, but I had not been invited. My feelings were hurt. There was nothing like a grand occasion to make me feel fat and unworthy. I stayed close with Diana, kept having lunch with her each week, though now I'd be zipping off from the gallery to see her in Buckingham Palace. On one occasion, Bill Drum had spied the safety pins on my cuffs and lent me his gold cufflinks. I knew that Diana had very little social life. She never went out, never did anything except to be adored. She was and is the most beautiful, perfect princess, but perfection came at a cost, even for Diana. She was 2 years younger than I, and I strove to support and protect her as I would a younger sister, as I still do today as a best friend. It was only natural then that I'd get invited to the occasional cast of thousands dance at Windsor Castle, for Andrew's 21st birthday, for example, and later for Edward's. But the big one came in the spring of 1985, when I found a heavy bond envelope in our postal slot. It was from Lieutenant Colonel Sir Blair Stuart Wilson, Deputy Master of the Royal Household, requesting the pleasure of your company at the Queen's house party at Windsor Castle during the week of Royal Ascot. Oh. Now I could make coffee nervous. Royal Ascot wasn't so formal as in Mum's Day, when each evening was a white-collar affair, but it required a real wardrobe, hats and gloves, and real shoes and clothes that looked right together. My androgynous dinner jacket would be out of its league there. I was in a state. I didn't know what to do. I finally borrowed clothes from my ever-tolerant stepmother and had a few things stitched together. I wasn't ready. I could never be ready for this, but here I came nonetheless. On Tuesday morning, June 18, Patty drove me the 20 miles to Windsor. He was like that. He would do anything for me that he could. A footman met us at the castle's private entrance to take my luggage. A lady-in-waiting led me through a maze of corridors to my room, a major bit of exercise. We stopped at a suite in the Edward III Tower to be met by this lovely, friendly young girl, a housemaid named Louise Penn. She shared a laugh with me, which I sorely needed. Then she helped me unpack and organize my clothes for pressing, a great luxury. Louise would take care of me the whole length of my stay, pointing me in the right direction, making sure my hat stayed on. I doubt I'd have made it through without her. On my bedside table was a card embossed with the Queen's cipher, listing the 4-day schedule of mealtimes, along with a seating plan for the day. For lunch, I had been placed between a Vice Admiral and Prince Andrew, then on leave from his duties on HMS Brazen. More jitters. I had seen Andrew on occasion since our childish games of tag, and one of those occasions had left me red-faced. We had been invited to the same weekend at Flore's Castle, the regal home of the Duke and Duchess of Roxburgh. I'd felt out of my depth, and when I walked down to the Sunday breakfast, I'd silently cursed my heels as they squeaked over the wood floor. I entered the dining room into a load of men with their newspapers. Morning, morning, and I longed to sit down quickly with my half grapefruit and be ignored. That was such a thing, wasn't it? Like, I don't know, from the 60s up until the 90s, I'll just have half a grapefruit. Thank you. Like, really? For breakfast? They're so sour. Am I crazy? Have I just been eating not right grapefruit, or am I eating the pith? Someone tell me. Someone who eats grapefruit, because I just think they've fallen out of favor. If they're good, I'll start eating them. Okay, I remember once when I was a kid, my granddad ate so much grapefruit that he got gout in his foot. I hurried toward a table with some newspapers, something I could hide behind. And there was Andrew standing next to me. So much for safe havens. I was ultra nervous now, and as he reached across the table to get a paper, I somehow thought he was leaning toward me for a good morning kiss. So I gave him one, and he looked at me and said, "Oh, thank you very much." Oh, I didn't mean to do that, I cried, which he must have found quite hilarious. It honestly hadn't been deliberate, just another Fergie fiasco. And now, just my luck, I was seated almost on top of him, where I'd be at the mercy of his famous needling. I had yet to suspect that matchmaker Diana had engineered this. I stepped into the green drawing room at 12:45 on the dot for drinks. At 1 p.m., I took my place at a table long enough for shuffleboard, 13 people on each side, one on each end. For the duration of the meal, conversation followed basic protocol. Following the Queen's lead, the ladies would speak to the men on their right or their left, alternating with each course. Isn't that something? So I guess that explains why sometimes when I'm watching films, it's like all of a sudden they turn and they start, just out of nowhere. It's on cue. They know when they're supposed to change conversations. Okay. When I turned to face Andrew, I was struck by how handsome he was in his morning suit, and soon my worries had flown. Andrew was easy, and I felt relaxed with him. for me a rare condition, even though I addressed him as sir as per protocol. We both knew the same idiot jokes. We both loved a good prank. When the chocolate profiteroles came around, I tried to pass. I was on a diet, as usual. But Andrew claimed that refusing them would be improper etiquette. Then, when it came time to take his portion, he refused. No, thank you very much. And I indignantly swatted him on the shoulder with the back of my hand. Out of such humble beginnings came a great and lasting friendship, one that endures today. As I came to know Andrew that week, he seemed like a very charming, gentle giant who had sprung magically from the woodwork. Now a lamp shone into my forest. I'm sorry. I'm going to leave that joke alone. And I'd been rescued by the great-looking man with a blinding smile. Small gifts began to flatter me in Clapham. A rose cut from the palace garden, a romantic letter. Later that summer, I was invited up to Balmoral. More terror. I hauled up my poor stepmother's wardrobe. I'd be changing 3 times a day for lunch, tea, and dinner. Andrew was there with a friend, a girl, and I became anxious because Nigel Dempster's diary in the Daily Mail had just noted my involvement with Patty. Would Andrew write me off? I took him aside and told him that I'd been going out with Patty, and I hoped he didn't mind. And he said, "Why should I mind? I like you. I couldn't care less about that." That was a very good reaction, I thought. Here was a man taking me as I was, without prerequisites or conditions, who knew what he believed and didn't mind what others thought. Nor was I ever jealous at the gossip of Andrew with some other lady. He cared for me, and that was enough. See, I told you, I thought that they had some sort of understanding with one another from the very beginning, and seems like they did. Our courtship was still mostly unspoken, but we got closer that week at Balmoral. I cast myself into Andrew's every pursuit. I gave him the same fervent support I had once lent to Patty's business deals or to Dad's polo. I could be whatever Andrew wanted me to be. I was the chameleon queen. I would dazzle the assembly at lunch with my slapstick and then run up every hill, go out with the guns like a seasoned infantryman. I didn't shoot, but I was always out there, brimming with energy and gumption. Today, I would be less enthusiastic at such sport. My sympathies lie with the bird. I know what it is to be hunted. I couldn't have been so different back then, barely a decade ago. Where was the me in all this? Where were my feelings? Did I stop and think about myself at all? Of course I never did. I was still running on my treadmill like Alice's rabbit, still speeding pell-mell for reasons lost and mysterious. As Andrew would acknowledge months later on television, our romance was no thunderbolt. It was more like a plant with good southern exposure, growing slowly but thriving by the day. On occasion, I would join him for dinner at the palace. Other times, he would park his green Jaguar, protection officer included, outside 40 lavender gardens, and we'd dine in my tiny kitchen. The locale didn't matter as long as Andrew returned my phone calls. And he did, every time. He was constant. He showed interest in me. What a remarkable phenomenon. At first, it was hard to fathom that I was serving baked beans to the sovereign second son. But that distanced feeling soon passed. From a life lacking in all sureness and conviction, I began to feel confident of something huge, that I loved Andrew and he loved me back. I was swept away and gave myself up to it, as to the ocean's surf. Here was this amazing person who needn't compete with anyone for being a prince, and he wanted me. We played silly games. We acted like children together. We liked each other before we loved. I had dinner with Patty that autumn and broke it off. He let me go freely and graciously. It was, I think, what he had hoped would come to pass, because he felt that Andrew was a better man for me and that I should be with a younger person who could give me what I needed. In December of 1985, Brazen docked in the port of London. Diana convinced me to come out with her to visit Andrew. Brazen indeed, as the press was still blind to what was going on. In fact, they would ignore me for some while longer. In their eyes, I probably wasn't Andrew's type. To make me feel stronger in my first public appearance with the royal family, Diana lent me a smart black and white checked coat dress. At one point, when the photographers were upon us, popping questions and clicking shutters, I looked over at my friend in befuddlement. "Just keep smiling," Diana whispered. And I did, as I would for long years to come. I always felt safe in mimicking Diana. She was so far ahead of me on the learning curve. Such a deft ambassadress for Britain and the royal family. No situation fazed her. She gave no hint to me or anyone of the problems she shouldered at the time. A bulimic must be highly secretive so as not to be found out. Diana simply went out each day and did an exceptional job in what people now realize was a most difficult position. I will always respect her for that. When I lived in Clapham, Diana helped me by giving me all her shoes and, less happily, her plantar warts. I cannot believe she told us that. We wore the same size. I tried to copy Diana's clothes as I had Carolyn's before her. I thought Diana had all the answers. For one who had so little sense of self, fashion was just another morass. For New Year's, Andrew invited me out to Sandringham, the Queen's private estate in Norfolk. We were getting serious, all right. A few weeks before, Andrew had asked me to address him by his first name. For 6 months, I had kept calling him Sir as per protocol, though more and more lightheartedly. Sandringham was my first time to be with just the family, though the royal family, in all its genealogical extensions, could fill a small auditorium. I had been nervous before, but never like this. I allowed 4 hours to make a 90-minute trip. What if the car broke down, or I ran out of petrol and was late? With 2 hours to kill, I stopped at a local pub and changed from my grubby driving clothes into something sort of smart. Then, should I have a drink? What if they smelled it on me? But I needed something to soothe me. Considered vodka, easiest on the breath, settled on a substantial gin and tonic. Finally, I set off for my firing squad. As my car pulled up the Great Drive, I had gravel fever. I wanted the gravel to be silent, so no one would know I had arrived. I hadn't worn a jersey despite the cold, and my fright had left sweat rings on my smart silk shirt. Great parabolas of embarrassment. Then Andrew staged his sneak attack. As I got out of the car on that first crisp day of 1986, he said, "I love you." I felt like jumping back in the car and getting out again because I knew what I wanted to answer, but my tongue was knotted, and so I actually screamed. And when Andrew laughed in response, I just crumbled at the knees. I still had to pass through the creaking front door. I still had to greet the family in its gigantic drawing room. People were immediately charming, but I was the last arrival, and the in-jokes were flying, which made me feel even more the outsider. To this day, I remember that bizarre Martian sensation, and so I always make an effort to welcome people into a room, to be the first to extend my hand. My entrance was suitably grand. No sooner had Andrew brought me a drink than I tripped over the piano leg and sent it splashing over the sofa. Then, as I curtsied to the Queen, my boyfriend's mother, I kicked one of her dogs. It was a glancing blow, but corgis are a melodramatic breed, and you would have thought the little yapper was bound for the royal kennel in the sky. My main concern was protocol. At bottom, protocol is simply good manners. What Mom taught me at home, no more and no less. You stand up when people come into the room and so forth. But that day, the stakes were higher, the rules more complex. There seemed to be hundreds of people in that room, and it was a safe bet, or so I thought, that they were all of nobler birth than the red head from Clapham. I knew that one must curtsy to members of the royal family, and not with just a bob of the head either, but as low as you could make it without bumping the coffee table or crashing to the floor. Then there were the titles. Whom did I call sir or ma'am? Who went by lord or lady? Who could be addressed by their actual first names? When uncertain, I decided it was better to err on the respectful side. Whenever I went to some new place, it wasn't enough for me to just smile and fit in like a normal person. I was that pathetic shy type who would compensate with noise and bustle. I could carry it off so you'd think that I knew exactly what I was doing or wearing or saying, and everything was fine. I was the life of every party, the house comedian. Good old Fergie form, she's a guinea a minute. But inside the laughter dwelt my own worst critic, my hanging judge, the self-hating core of me. Inside, good old Fergie was dying. Let's see how much. Oh, we don't have very much left. Okay. In February, I joined Charles and Diana at Closter's while Andrew was at sea. I was in my element. I knew everybody from past holidays there, and after years of skiing powder at Verbier, I could get down the mountain faster than most men. Looking back, it must have been hell for Diana. She was going through one of her rough patches, didn't ski that well anyway, longed to stay inside. And there was rosy-cheeked Fergie, hearty to the last, always in crashing good form. I must have been maddening to her, especially after Charles prodded her, and not for the last time. Why can't you be more like Fergie? As they say, you must be careful what you wish for someday you might get it. Later that month, traveling under an assumed name, I met Andrew for a tryst at Flore's castle, the scene of my crime, where I'd first kissed him over the newspapers. As snow began to fall that night, I wasn't at all surprised to hear Andrew propose, and I accepted with all my heart, toasted our future with champagne. Yet at the same time, I thought he must be somehow teasing, that he could not possibly mean it. And so in the most romantic moment of my life, I looked the man I loved straight in the eye and said, if you wake up tomorrow morning, you can tell me that it's all a huge joke. Whenever people promised me something, I always gave them an out so they wouldn't feel trapped. Never be a nag or a bore, as Dad said. I honestly didn't want Andrew to regret what might have been some reckless impulse. Oh my gosh, I totally resonate with that. Giving people an out. Like, I do that to my man all the time. I'm like, if you're sick of me, you can just tell me. It's like, girl, I'm getting sick of you now. Will you ever shut up? But oh my gosh, I mean, I know. Like, I know that later when we read Entitled, we're going to be like, ugh, Fergie, what? But right now in this book, oh, I just understand her so much. I understand that pain of wanting love so much and yet not believing when you have it, and providing a way out for people. And it's such a way to protect yourself. It's like, oh, well, it's almost like if you have a hand in it, then it doesn't have to hurt as much because it's not a full rejection. It's just that you gave them an offer and they took it, so it's still somewhat in your control. To his credit, oh, sorry, I skipped a line. I honestly didn't want Andrew to regret what might have been some reckless impulse, which is quite a large and sobering thing to look back at, that I had so little confidence, such a spindly sense of self-worth. To his credit, Andrew held firm the next morning. As the Queen was on official tour in Asia, he couldn't get her permission for 3 weeks, a formality, but a real and legal one. In the meantime, our engagement would be our intimate secret, to be shared with no one. I rather liked that. I was an inordinately private person anyway about matters close to my heart. But true privacy, as I'd find upon my return to London, was but a memory. Ever since Sandringham, the press had suspected that something was afoot between Andrew and me, and now the Fergie beat was in full bloom. There were 8 major tabloids in London, and it seemed that each one had put a photographer on my case 24 hours a day. Few can understand what it is like to be an ordinary private person and then overnight to plunge into public life. There were no stages to the process. It happened abruptly, relentlessly. Those photographers lodged by my doorstep each evening. When I drove to my small office in Mayfair, I would be trailed by 5 or 6 cars and a motorbike or 2. The journalists sat upon my favorite coffee bar like urban anthropologists. They ferreted through my dustbin, found a sketch of my ruby engagement ring and reproduced it. Did the same with some idle scrap of doodling. When I went to the palace to see Andrew, I would park at the tradesman's entrance and take the service lift up, quiet as a spy, and if I really needed to fool them, I would hide in a laundry basket in the boot of Carolyn's car, and she would take me where I needed to go. For the most part, I didn't slink away from the press. I just went along. I took their attention in stride. I rather enjoyed it, actually. Remember, we are discussing a woman who lived with fear. I feared parking tickets and taking wrong turns. And most of all, I feared the dark. I would sprint to my apartment at night with my shoes in one hand and my keys in the other as weapons against lurking assailants. But now my world had changed. Now I could stop the car any time and go back to a press person to ask for directions. Or I could park at night by that sinister cemetery and stroll home without a care because all these people were with me. You can wait out there for as long as you like, I would tell them before shutting the front door. But look after my car for me, please. Once I even came back out and served them coffee. Besides, I had nothing to hide. I was just me, the country girl, and I'd fallen in love with this very sweet man who ate M&Ms off my table and who happened to be a prince. I was a perfectly normal woman pitched into an extraordinary situation, the classic fairy tale. In those giddy days leading up to my wedding, the press and I had much in common. We were both quite taken with this creation called Fergie. We both seemed to like her a lot, quite a bit, in fact. and we were both quite ready to rip her to pieces as soon as it came time to change the tune. On March 15, the Queen gave Andrew her consent. 4 days later, a delay which allowed the budget to go to the House of Commons and still get front-page play, our engagement was announced. I awoke with a withering migraine that day, but I perked up on cue for the BBC. With Andrew at my side, I felt at ease before the TV cameras. He taught me by example. I just watched him, and then I jumped in. From where I sit now, I was astoundingly naive. I told the interviewer that I'd keep working at my publishing job, of course, and how I would cope with all the new demands upon me. I could handle anything because Andrew and I were a team, a good team, and nothing could defeat us. Fergie mania had exploded. When I walked that afternoon from my office to a nearby hotel, the herd nearly crushed a woman bystander into the railing. Policemen lined the street to keep some semblance of order. I had slept my last night in Lavender Gardens. My old routines would be too dicey now. The next morning, I would wake up in Buckingham Palace, and Andrew's personal protection officer would drive me to work in my man's Jaguar, with a police car tight behind us. I had never felt so alive and open to adventure, and yet so safe. That feeling filled me up. It stilled all my yearning, left no room for discontent. I could neatly sidestep the obvious question, the one that would swell inside me like an aneurysm till it nearly burst and did me in. What on earth am I doing here? Okay, we are going to stop there for now because I have to go to the store and get some flour because I have to do some baking tonight. I think I will come on again later today. I don't want to promise because I'm not 100% sure, but that is the goal, is that this evening I will come on and we'll read another chapter or two. Okay, let me know how you like this so far, what you're thinking. Are you finding her relatable? And I know that she turns out to be not someone that we would probably look up to. I mean, her relationship with Jeffrey Epstein is, concerning enough, let alone anything else that she's gotten into. But in this book, people are just rarely one thing. Well, no one is ever one thing. And so you do see this humanity in her and this longing and this desire that makes her so relatable, at least to me. And it's probably a good cautionary tale to work on yourself and find that self-acceptance and find what you are and what you're about, because if not, it can take you to some very, very dark places. Okay, well, thank you so much for being with me. Please comment, like, subscribe, hit the bell. You know what to do. Blah, blah, blah. Thank you so much. I will see you later today. Bye.